You wake up in darkness. The cold stone beneath your back chills you to the bone, and the damp mold in the air scrapes your throat with every breath. Your hands are bound with rough rope, soaked in sweat and blood, whose you can't remember. Yesterday was ordinary. You worked in the field until sunset, cooked a stew from the last of your cabbage, and refused to give your neighbor a sack of grain. You barely had enough for winter yourself. Today, you are under arrest for witchcraft. They didn't even ask if you believed in the devil. They didn't ask if you attended a coven. They simply brought you to court and said, "Silent, the devil forbids you to speak," and that is proof. According to the Malleus Maleficarum, 1486, silence during interrogation is one of the main signs of connection with evil forces. You don't know that in a week, your testimony under torture will lead to the arrest of 47 people. You don't know that it all started with one refusal to share grain. You just try to understand. How did it happen that you, a simple woman, became an enemy of the entire Christian world? The paradox is that the most pious cities in Europe, those where bells rang for prayer every morning, where priests preached mercy, where children memorized the Bible, became the bloodiest. It was where faith was strongest that people were killed most often. Virtue did not save, it killed. Because in the 16th century, to save another soul meant to burn their body. And the more you believed in God, the easier it was to believe that your neighbor was a servant of the devil. For if evil exists, it must be somewhere. And if it's not visible, it must be hiding. In silence, in poverty, in a woman's gaze, and especially in refusal to share. In the Holy Roman Empire, the epicenter of the witch hunt from 1560 to 1630, between 25,000 and 30,000 people were executed, more than in all other European countries combined. 90% of them were women over 40. By the end of this story, you will understand. The witch hunt was not a hunt for the guilty. It was a machine for producing victims, a system in which anyone could become a target, not for a crime, but for inconvenience, for envy, for silence, for having something others did not. And most importantly, you will understand how religious virtue, legal procedure, and mass fear intertwined into a deadly noose from which there was no escape, because you weren't accused of what you did. You were accused of who you could be. And in a world where witches are real, everyone is a suspect. Even your refusal of communion, even your glance at a priest, all could become proof in the eyes of a court legitimized by the Malleus Maleficarum and fueled by fear of plague, famine, and chaos. Anna Hermann, Tyrol, 5072. She has 3 children, a barn full of grain, and no man by her side. A neighbor asks for a sack of grain to feed her family. Anna refuses. Not out of malice. She barely has enough herself. 3 days later, guards break down her door. The accusation: she caused a drought. In court, she screams, cries, pleads for witnesses. The judge shakes his head. Silent, the devil commanded it. A week later, under torture, she names 47 people. All neighbors, all arrested, all because of one sack of grain. And this is not a tragedy. It's an instruction. Would you have given your neighbor your last grain? If yes, you might have survived. If no, you would have burned. The system wasn't looking for witches. It was creating them. The target became a woman over 40, without a husband, with something of her own. A house, a cow, a reputation, all of it a threat. A witch isn't someone who casts spells. A witch is someone who doesn't beg, doesn't bow, doesn't share. In a patriarchal world, this is worse than blasphemy. Here's the shock. Wealthy women were accused 3 times more often than poor ones. Why? Their property was confiscated. The court received money. The monastery, land. The prince, a house. The burning was justified by faith, but paid for with gold. Würzburg, 1623. After the execution of a widow, Her garden went to the bishop, and her cellar to the city treasury. A clear conscience, a full treasury. Denunciation wasn't a fit of rage. It was a calculation, envy in a cassock. But even a lie needs legitimacy. A normal court would expose the liar. So the rules changed. The presumption of innocence was killed. Now the court wasn't looking for truth. It was looking for confirmation. And for that, it needed a manipulator, a guide, an instruction manual for creating witches. And it appeared. Malleus Maleficarum, 1486. A bestseller for 200 years, a book where every symptom is a conviction. You don't go to church? Witch. Too young? Witch. Too old? Witch. No children? Witch. Many children? Witch. A glance, silence, refusal. All proof. The book turned fear into law, and suspicion into a death sentence. Imagine, your refusal to share bread becomes a denunciation. Your crying during interrogation, a confession. Your neighbors, executioners. You are innocent. But guilt is no longer required, only a pretext. And anything can be a pretext. Even your silence, especially your silence. You stand before the judge. Your hands tremble. Your voice is gone. You want to say, I am innocent. But your tongue won't obey. You remain silent. The judge smiles. There it is, the proof. In a normal court, silence is your right. Here, it is your sentence. According to the Bamberg Tribunal protocols, too calm a gaze, or clothing without a cross, was already evidence. You don't go to church on Sundays? Witch. You cry during interrogation? Witch. You don't cry? Still a witch. The system offers no chances. It offers a script. Imagine, this is you. You are accused of bringing plague to your neighbor's cow. You say, I don't even know what it looks like. But proving you haven't met the devil is impossible. And in this court, the burden of proof is on you. Not on the accusation. On you. You must prove the absence of something that wasn't there. It's like proving you didn't dream about a black cat. Impossible. And that's why guilt is inevitable. Here's how it worked. Denunciation, interrogation, torture, confession, execution, all according to instructions. And even if you had a lawyer, he stayed silent. Because defending a witch meant doubting the existence of witches. And doubt meant heresy. Heresy meant the stake. In Trier, during 12 years of hunting, not a single verdict was overturned. Not one. The court wasn't seeking truth. It was confirming fear. Would you have survived? Let's check. You are a woman. Over 40. You own a house. No husband. A neighbor asks for grain. You refuse. 3 days later, a denunciation. 5 days later, torture. 7 days later, the stake. What if you had given it away? Maybe you would have survived. But the system wasn't about justice. It was about control. And this is where it gets interesting. All these rules, they weren't laws of kings, not papal decrees. They were from a book, written by 2 monks. Malleus Maleficarum. It turned fear into procedure, silence into evidence, poverty into suspicion, and a woman into a target. The author, Heinrich Institoris, wasn't looking for witches. He was designing them, page by page, chapter by chapter. He wasn't writing about evil. He was writing about power. Look at your hands. Imagine them bound. That you are accused of something you didn't do. That silence is your end. Now ask yourself, what would I say if I knew every word would be used against me? You wouldn't survive. No, because the system didn't allow survival. It allowed burning. Gertrude Stein, Innsbruck, 1485. She baked bread, healed with herbs, knew how to stop bleeding. But when the burgomaster's 2 cows died, her name was whispered first. Heinrich Institoris came for her. He wasn't looking for truth. He was saving his career. The town didn't believe in witches. Courts acquitted. So he planted bones in her chest, bribed a servant, ordered him to shout at night as if the devil were calling. A week later, Gertrude hung in an iron belt. Her skin rotted, her bones cracked. And Instatoris wrote, "This is proof." Then he published the book, 28 reprints, 30,000 burned, her name, ashes, his, in libraries. Do you think this is madness? No, it's an instruction. Malleus Maleficarum isn't a collection of fears. It's a legal weapon. It explicitly states, torture is mandatory. False witness testimony is permissible. A child is a full-fledged informant. A judge reading this book feels no guilt. He feels a mission. In Swiss archives, sentences quote the Malleus as if it were gospel. Pain is the path to truth. A scream is a confession. Silence is an alliance with the devil. Imagine, they put a witch's belt on you. Iron rings with spikes dig into your ribs. You don't sleep. You don't eat. You can't walk. The skin under the metal turns black. After a month, you see a black cat on the ceiling. After 2, you sign a confession. And you haven't even been tried. Just suspected. And that was enough. Because the book allowed it. Would you have endured? No. No one endured. Instatoris knew. Fear needs order. Chaos is frightening. But if you give it rules, it becomes sacred. Malleus Maleficarum turned panic into procedure. Famine, the witch's fault. Plague, witch. Drought, witch. And if your cow is alive but your neighbor's isn't, you're a witch. The system doesn't look for the guilty. It looks for the convenient. And makes them guilty. Step by step. Torture by torture. Page by page. Look here. This isn't a story about the Middle Ages. This is a blueprint, and it still works. When you're accused of something you can't refute, you've already lost. When silence is evidence, and a scream is also evidence, there's no way out. You're not in court. You're in a trap. And this trap is printed on paper, approved by the church, and signed in blood. This village is suffocating. For the 3rd year in a row, the land yields nothing. The wheat is black as tar. Children with empty eyes chew bark. And the priest, from the church roof, whispers, "The devil is here. Witches have cursed the well." You look at your neighbor. Her cow is still alive. Why? You don't ask. You remember. At night, someone sees a shadow near the cemetery. In the morning, a denunciation against old Marfa. She doesn't go to church. She doesn't cry at funerals. She is silent. A week later, she's led to the square. A month later, ashes. And the hunger remains. But the village sleeps peacefully. Evil has been defeated, though no one knows what it was. Would you have survived? Imagine, plague knocks at the door. Every 3rd person dies. Doctors are helpless. Scholars are silent. And the Malleus Maleficarum says, a witch is nearby. She breathes the same air, drinks the same water. And you start to search, not for evidence, for suspicions. A witch is the answer, simple, clear, insane, but comforting. Because chaos is scarier than the devil. Archaeologists in Bavaria found that during years of crop failure, executions increased 10-fold. Not 2-fold, not 5-fold. 10-fold. Fear is the perfect fuel. It burns long, and it burns other people's lives. In France in 1609, an entire district in Les Bourdes was burned. Not one witch, not 2, the entire area. Without names, without faces. Just a rumor. There's a nest there. House after house, on fire. Families, in ashes. The church report is succinct, cleared of evil. Like a field of weeds. You think, I wouldn't have believed it? But you're hungry. Your child is crying. And a witch is an explanation. and you keep silent, and silence is complicity. Look here. Fear turns everyone into executioners, even those who don't hold the torch. You don't hit, but you don't defend. You don't denounce, but you don't argue. And that's enough. Because the system doesn't demand hatred. It needs your silence, your consent, your weariness. Now imagine, they lead you to the cellar. You're wearing an iron belt. Spikes dig into your ribs. You haven't slept for 30 days. You see a black cat on the wall. You hear the devil's voice in the dripping water. And you sign. Not because you're guilty, but because you want the pain to end. Torture isn't torture, it's salvation. Confession is forgiveness, even if it leads to the stake. You don't die as a witch. You die as a sinner, and that is holy. And this is where it gets interesting. In the eyes of the crowd, you are no longer a victim. You are redemption. Your death washes away their fear. Your body is a sacrifice on the altar of order. And yet, you simply didn't give away grain, or looked at the priest for too long, or were born a woman after 40. Would you have survived? No, because to survive meant to be nobody. And a witch is a role, and it will be imposed, even if you're silent. Especially if you're silent. You lie on the stone floor of the dungeon, naked, chained. The air is thick with urine and fear. Above you, the executioner. His voice, soft, almost tender. Confess, and God will forgive. The cold metal of the pincers touches your nipple. Pain is not punishment. Pain is the path to salvation. You understand? The only way to avoid the stake is to admit to what you haven't done. Even if, it tears you apart from the inside. The court wasn't looking for truth. It was looking for repentance. The Malleus Maleficarum stated directly, if you are silent, the devil holds your tongue. Confession is mercy. Lying is salvation. Torture became a prayer. Every scream, a psalm. Every wound, communion. You are innocent. But guilt is now mandatory, like breathing. And then, the most terrifying moment. They ask you, who is with you? And you name names. Not because you know. Because pain breaks the brain. Cortisol levels skyrocket. Sleep disappears. Water, torture. You see faces in the cracks of the wall. Hear voices in the drips. And you say, Martha, Johann, Ursula. Like Anna Hermann. Refused to give grain. Named 47 names. 47 fates. To the fire. One confession, a chain reaction. The village devours itself. Would you have endured? No. No one endured. Because the system doesn't want truth. It wants victims. Every confession is fuel. Every denunciation is a spark. The fire burns, meaning the devil is real. Meaning fear is justified, meaning tomorrow, more will be burned, and more, and more. Until only ashes and silence remain. Imagine, you're in the cellar. The spikes of the witch's belt dig into your ribs. 30 days without sleep. Your skin is black, your tongue, a rag. And suddenly, relief. Say the names, and it will end. You speak. You don't remember if it's true, but the pain subsides, even for a moment. And in that moment, heaven, false, deadly, but heaven. So torture became salvation, and a lie, holy. And this is where it gets interesting. You are no longer human. You are a conduit to new victims. Would you have survived? Let's check. If you tell the truth, you'll burn as stubborn. If you lie, you'll burn as a witch. And then those you named will be burned. There is no escape. Because the system isn't about guilt. It's about sacrifice. Now look at your hands. Imagine them trembling from cold and fear. And ask yourself, what names will I say when the pain becomes unbearable? You don't know. But the system knows. It waits. Trier. 1581. The square is packed like a fair. People sit on benches with baskets of bread and wine. Children play near the scaffold. Today, a priest burns. He was accused of reading prayers too softly. 368 fires in 12 years. Among the ashes, judges, monks, widows, children. No one screams, no one runs. Everyone watches and believes. Smoke is prayer. Ashes are purification. But in reality, these are 368 lives burned for the gold in the bishop's treasury. Confiscated houses, sold vineyards, empty barns that became someone else's property. The more they burned, the more they believed. The more they believed, the more they burned. This isn't a hunt. It's a cycle. A machine that feeds on fear and produces ashes. Each execution is proof that witches are real. And if witches are real, new fires are needed. The system doesn't want truth. It wants fuel. And it finds it easily. A woman over 40, without a husband, with a cow, with a house, with a gaze. Enough. In the Holy Roman Empire from 1560 to 1630, between 25 and 30,000 people were burned, 90% women. Not sorceresses, not devil women, just women who had something to lose. The rich, 3 times more often, than the poor. Why? Their property went to the treasury, their land, to monasteries, their cellars, to princes. Burning isn't faith, it's business in a cassock. Would you have survived? Imagine, you're over 40, you have a garden, a neighbor denounces you. They lead you to the square. The crowd applauds. Not out of malice, out of relief. Because evil is leaving. But it's not leaving. It's multiplying. Because every fire is an invitation to the next. Ashes don't cure hunger. Ashes don't stop the plague. Ashes are an illusion of control. Now, look at your hands. Imagine them holding a basket in the square. You look at the fire and you think, thank God it's not me. But the system has already chosen the next one, and the next, and you. Because the fire isn't the end. The fire is proof that witches exist. And if they exist, they must be sought. Deeper, further, until only you remain. Would you have survived? No, you would have watched. And stayed silent. Like everyone else, night. A candle on the table. Flickering light. Outside the window, smoke and screams. Johann Weyer writes, "The quill scratches paper like a claw on bone." He knows. Every word is a challenge. Every line is a self-condemnation. Nearby, a herbalist, an anatomical atlas, interrogation records. He doesn't argue with the devil. He asks, what if it's not the devil? What if it's illness, old age, hunger that drove the mind mad? He writes, she didn't fly to a coven. She hadn't slept for 3 weeks. Her mind broke like a rotten beam. Would you have believed him? Or would you also have screamed, burn the witch? Weyer was not an atheist. He was a doctor. He saw how epilepsy contorted the body, and how the court called it dancing with the devil. He knew depression made eyes empty, and how that emptiness became proof of connection with evil. He read Galen, studied Avicenna, understood the brain is not a temple but an organ, like the liver, like the heart, and it also gets sick. But in a world where every shadow is the devil, admitting this meant weakening faith. And faith is power. Power is gold. Gold is stakes. His book was published in 1563, On the Deceptions of Demons. But inside, not a call to hunt, but a diagnosis. He wrote, "Punishing the sick is not righteousness, it is cruelty. God does not punish those whom life has broken. God heals. But the church did not want healing. It wanted confirmation. Confirmation that evil is real, that it walks the streets, that it is in the old woman with the empty barn, Otherwise, why would the bishop need land? Why would the judge need payment for a verdict? And this is where it gets interesting. Wire was declared a heretic. His book was placed on the index of forbidden books. He was called a friend of witches, and witches are ashes. Whoever befriends ashes burns themselves. Would you have defended him? Imagine, you read his text in silence, and outside the door, guards, silent. You survive. Speak the truth. To the stake. The choice isn't about courage. It's about cost. And truth, then, cost lives. But Wire knew the main thing. Without torture, no witches. He saw under the spikes of the belt, without sleep, without water, anyone would confess to anything, even to what wasn't true, even to flying on broomsticks, even to kissing the devil, because the brain breaks faster than the body. And then it asks, say the names, and the pain will end. And there were no witches. There were broken people and a system that broke them further. In 1721, Prussia banned torture. And what happened? Witches disappeared. Not spared. Not pardoned. They just stopped appearing, like ghosts in the light. The machine stopped, not out of kindness, out of lack of fuel. Look at your hands. Imagine you are Wire. You know the truth. But to speak it means to die. And to remain silent means to let 100 more burn. What would you choose? You have already chosen. You are silent. Like everyone else, you wouldn't have survived. Not because you were weak, not because you sinned, but because the system offered no chances. It trapped you, where every action of yours was evidence. Silent. The devil holds your tongue. Screaming, you confess. Crying, you cast spells. Not crying, you're heartless. There's no way out. Only a role, victim or executioner. And if you're not burning, you're feeding the fire. Shot. A hand throwing a log into the fire. The witch hunt wasn't a fit of madness. It was a clear algorithm. Trigger, fear, fuel, envy. Interface, Malleus Maleficarum. Result, ashes and profit. The system didn't need monsters. It was enough to have a widow with a cow, an old woman with herbs, a woman who didn't bow. Enough. A witch isn't a being. It's a label for someone who can be removed without consequences. You think, I wouldn't be an executioner. But you're already silent when your neighbor is taken away. You don't defend when the outsider is bullied at the office. You don't argue when someone writes in a chat, let them burn. Silence is consent. And consent is complicity. Shot, a phone screen, a finger not pressing reply. Witches disappeared. But enemies remained. Today they are called differently. Traitors. Enemies of the people. Toxic. Outsiders. The essence is the same. The problem is not the system, but the person. Remove them, and everything will be fine. Hunger? Blame migrants. Crisis? Blame liberals. Sickness? Blame vaccines. Simple logic for a complex world. Convenient. Deadly. Do you feel your heart beating faster? This isn't fear of the past. It's a mirror of the present. When there's a crisis, the mind looks for a culprit. Not a cause. Not a solution. Exactly a culprit. Because hating is easier than thinking. Shot. A crowd with phones instead of torches. And this is where it gets interesting. You don't choose between good and evil. You choose between fear and reason. Fear says, they are dangerous. Isolate. Destroy. Reason asks, why do I believe this? Who benefits? In the 16th century, bishops benefited. Today, algorithms, leaders, sellers of hatred. They feed on your fear. Like ashes fed the fire. Imagine, you are accused of something you didn't do. You cannot prove otherwise. And everyone around you expects you to burn, so they can feel safe. This isn't a story. It's a test. And it's happening right now. So choose. Fear. If you believe that enemies will save the world. Reason. If you understand. The real enemy is the system that teaches us to fear each other. Your word is your choice. And choice is your power. Because witches are no more, but the ashes are still warm.